Good morning. I'm Gary DeWaal, and this is Bridging the Week for March 12th to 16th, and today is March 19th, 2018. J. Christopher Giancarlo, Chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, laid out his priorities for the remainder of 2018 in a speech before the FIA at its annual conference last week. Unrelatedly, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed suit against the former Chief Information Officer of a division of a major company that was hacked and sustained a substantial data breach last year for trading on knowledge of the breach prior to public disclosure of the incident. He was also criminally indicted for his actions. This week, SIFMA, the Securities Industry Association, will be hosting its annual Law and Compliance Conference outside Disneyland in Orlando, Florida, where I'll be speaking on cryptocurrency regulation. So I can prepare better for my presentation and timely get on my flight, let's get started. In a speech last week before the annual FIA industry gathering in Boca Raton, Florida, Commodity Futures Trading Commission Chairman J. Christopher Giancarlo suggested that finalizing the swap deal at the Minimis level, proposing a rule to better align current swaps trading rules with legislative intent, and working with other financial regulators to help ensure that the supplemental leverage ratio better reflects clearing members' true exposure to swaps would be key priorities for the Commission this year. I discussed the significance of each of these proposals on the article version of Bridging the Week at www.bridgingtheweek.com. Check it out. Separately, in their own speeches in Florida last week, CFTC Commissioners Ralston Benham and Brian Quintanz both criticized potential extension of the supervisory authority of the European Securities and Markets Authority by the European Commission over both European Union and third country clearinghouses, including the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and IceClear US. Mr. Benham indicated that any change to the existing EU CFTC practice of recognizing host regulator equivalence oversight, quote, is unacceptable, end of quote. Mr. Quintanz said that the CFTC should retaliate against the EU should the EU adopt this proposal, including now by not granting requests for no action relief by European national market regulators from various CFTC rules and orders. Before the FIA, Mr. Giancarlo also indicated that while he is committed to, quote, moving forward, end of quote, on final position limit rules, he would not conclude rulemaking until it could be done, quote unquote, properly by a full commission of 5 commissioners. Currently, there are only 3 CFTC commissioners. Mr. Giancarlo, who voted against the last proposed iteration of regulation automated trading, also indicated that he was open to consider whether there might be parts of Reg AT that could serve as the foundation for a, quote unquote, new and truly effective rule. However, he said that the goal, quote, must be an effective rule, not just any rule, end of quote, and suggested no timeline for rolling out a new version of Reg AT. On March 14th, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed civil charges against Ying for allegedly trading on proprietary non-public information related to the massive 2017 hack and data breach of his employer, Equifax Inc., in advance of the firm's public announcement of the incident. At the time, Mr. Ying was Chief Information Officer of Equifax's United States Information Systems Business Unit. According to the SEC, after Equifax's detection of the possible widespread breach in July 2017, Mr. Ying was enlisted on August 25th on a project to help deal with certain aspects of the problem. At the time, Mr. Ying was not advised that the breach was of Equifax's own system. However, by August 28th, he deduced this from information he was given. In response, Mr. Ying exercised and sold options he owned, realizing total proceeds in excess of $950,000 US. After the close of the market on September 7th, Equifax made a public announcement regarding its data breach. According to the SEC, by selling his Equifax shares prior to the public announcement, Mr. Ying avoided a $117,000 US loss he would have incurred had he sold his shares after the news became public. The SEC filed its action against Mr. Ying in a federal court in Atlanta, Georgia. On March 13th, Mr. Ying was indicted for insider trading by a federal grand jury for the same conduct. And finally, the government of Gibraltar issued a proposal for the regulation of digital token sales, secondary digital token market platforms, and investment services related to digital tokens for non-security and non-virtual currency purposes that also expressed a narrow view of what constituted a security token. According to Gibraltar Finance, most digital tokens are not securities because they are not structured as such, meaning they afford no equity interest or right to distributions, for example, of profits or in the event of a firm's insolvency. They more often represent, quote, the advanced sale of products that entitle holders to access future networks or consume financial services, end quote, and thus represent, quote unquote, commercial products or have the characteristics of virtual currencies. Holders of the digital tokens, said Gibraltar Finance, expect a return once a project is complete and successful, which is, quote, similar to early acquisition and holding of commodities with a view to trading them later at a higher price, end of quote. Under Gibraltar's proposal, digital tokens that are akin to securities are already subject to existing securities regulation. Its proposed new regulatory regime will solely address tokens that are commonly referred to as quote-unquote utility or quote-unquote access tokens and will address primary market promotion, sale, and distribution. Generally, Gibraltar proposes to implement disclosure rules and financial crime provisions, require authorization and supervision of token sale sponsors, require authorized sponsors to implement and follow a code of conduct, and regulate the conduct of secondary market platforms. Gibraltar hopes to complete its implementation of a regulatory scheme by October 2018. Gibraltar Finance attempts to promote Gibraltar as a center for financial services within the EU. The SEC takes a very broad view of what constitutes a security. Gibraltar's definition of a security is far more narrow and appropriate and commonsensical. According to Gibraltar Finance, most often, digital tokens do not qualify as securities under Gibraltar or EU legislation. This is because, quote, they represent the advanced sale of products that entitle holders to access future networks or consume future services, end of quote. There is no direct or indirect tie to an underlying project's income stream, and there are no distribution rights in case of a project's insolvency. My analysis of how Gibraltar's standards might be applied in the U.S. are in the article version of this blog on www.bridgingtheweek.com. That's it. Check it out. Well, that's it for this week's edition of Bridging the Week. As always, there's more information in each article and more articles on the article version of Bridging the Week on the website. I already gave you the address. Check it out. I'm Gary DeWaal. Have a great week, and until the next edition of Bridging the Week, ciao.